the core skill of, I like how you said it, it's like the core leadership skill is to tell the truth up front in a way that actually has us coming closer. A worker who's highly, highly engaged is 300% more productive than a worker who's resentful or has low morale. But if you get really curious about the person and how they're feeling and how they think and how they look at the world, and how they're doing in their job, and how they're doing in their lives in general, it actually creates bonds, and it creates understanding, because we can learn a lot about life from getting curious about other people. But actually, the more personal we are at work, the more invested we become in the people around us. And the more invested we become in the people around us, the more invested everyone is to do the mission of the company together. If you want to go fast, go alone. And if you want to go far, go together. If you're a leader, there are people in the company who are better at culture than you are. Guaranteed. Even though they have less power, they can see things and sense things that you cannot.
Okay, so today we have with us Jason Diggs. Jason is author of a newly released book, Conflict is Equal to Energy, the transformative practice of authentic relating. He's also co-founder of ART International, chief storyteller of Authentic Revolution. So Jason is a modern Renaissance man. He's an artist, philosopher, teacher, and media producer rolled into one. From 2003 to 2012, he worked for Integral Institute to create thousands of hours of educational media on the topics of transpersonal psychology, spirituality, productivity, and personal growth. Everything very critical for all the leaders for our channel. So he's obsessed with how humans can live and relate optimally and have a unified world despite profound differences. And he has facilitated groups and taught authentic relating in circling since 2012. And he's led courses over more than 20 cities around the world. So I'm actually part of an authentic relating group by Nitya Shanti, which is inspired by Jason. And last month, I attended a session by Jason himself and thus requested him for this interview for our leaders audience. And I'm reading his book. Do you have this book with you right now? Reading his book, Conflict is Equal to Energy. And I find it fascinating and relatable with practical games and exercises. So welcome, Jason, to this show.
Thank you so much for having me here, Ron. I'm excited for this. Yeah.
So as I shared, this show is focused on learning through stories, real life stories. And because I have learned that stories stay longer than just the concept and the teaching. So I would request you to share some of the stories from your life as we go ahead. So, tell us a bit about your personal journey to put everything in perspective for the audience.
Yeah, well, I spent 12 years as a video producer. So I was, meeting semi-famous people like Deepak Chopra and David Data, and putting microphones on them to record dialogues. And I was the technical and creative person behind the scenes, creating lots of content. And that's really how I learned. I learned all about transpersonal psychology and human development, and it was basically like going to grad school for what it is to be human, like working with many leaders around the world. And at a certain point, which was about 9 years ago, I really had the idea of maybe I could be on the other side of the camera. Maybe I could do this thing that my mentors and teachers are doing, which is just talking to people and creating the space for people to have these profound experiences. And so I led a little group of 5 people, and it was 5 to 8 people, and I led it for a few weeks in a row, and I just did it with no training, just I just had a vision for it. And then, yeah, found that was my life calling. And so I got a lot of training in facilitation and studied with many people, and then eventually, started my own programs, and founded a company that has put, thousands of people through this 2-day training that we have. Um, but it was a interesting path. I'm in my mid 40s, so I didn't really start teaching until I was 37 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And Mhm.
And let me take you also back to your childhood. Give me some idea about your childhood. How was that journey? What was the biggest challenge you faced
Mm.
that time?
Well, I have 5 brothers,
Okay.
so very, very interesting. Um, a lot of love in my upbringing and a lot of chaos. Like there was just a lot of us, and a lot of young boy energy. Loving fights between brothers. And um, I think the biggest challenge for me was uh, often feeling like I didn't belong in the world in a certain way. I
Mhm.
was raised very, very religious. My uncle was a pastor. I go into this in the beginning of the book, in the
Yes.
preface, a
Mm.
little bit of my story. And I really wrestled with religion. I remember being 14 years old and having like this argument with my father. And like, my father was like this really philosophical, like really intellectual, like loving man. And I basically told him everything that the church was teaching was wrong. And we had this like argument. And I think what it was is like, I couldn't imagine that my friends in school were going to hell. Like like there was something in me that um, took what the teachings of the church and imagined applying it to the people that were around me, and there was just like a big no in my system. um,
Mm.
and so there was a really interesting way in which the beginning of my life, especially my early 20s, was really about trying to reconcile a lot of the beauty and the amazing parts of the church. In America, there's a strong fundamentalist religious um, culture in certain parts, especially in the South, but all over the U.S. There's these types of churches that really believe the Bible is literally true, and really encourage people to interpret it in a very particular way. And it just didn't fit for me. And so a lot of my early work in personal growth was really about understanding the Christian religion and what parts of it fit for me, what parts didn't, and what Jesus really taught. Yeah. And so I think I always wrestled with how humans treated each other. It was, I was always, it always pained me in a certain way. Um,
Mm. So before we get into more detail, another question I had: what would uh, classify or as one or two core events which shaped your personality in your life journey? There may be many, but what would step out as which was the turning points?
Yeah, well, the biggest turning point in my life was around 26, 27 years old, moving from the East Coast of America to Colorado. And I didn't know anybody. I didn't know anybody in Colorado. I had met some people over the internet. So I had like these internet friends that were, we would talk to each other on forums, and just through text. And I went there really on faith, that I could get connected to the community that I wanted to be a part of, and really seeking friends and peers that I could really relate to, and were like me and had a similar way of making sense of the world. And so that's when I got connected to the Ken Wilber community. Like about 6 months after I moved to Colorado, I was working full time for Ken Wilber and Integral Institute. And so that was a big deal, to leave, the East Coast, my family, like my full life, and yeah, and I've been in Colorado for the last 20 years.
Okay, so let's dive directly into the your expert area of authentic relating. And you know what I thought as I was reading about the reading your book as well as whatever I've experienced, I realized that this might be the core leadership skill, and therefore I called you for this channel, which is for leaders. So can you in your own style explain what authentic relating is about and how it became the core purpose of your life?
Yes. Authentic relating is about telling the truth without blowing up your relationships.
Hmm.
So the authentic part is being truthful, honest, open, transparent, right? Saying what you really feel, right? But then the relating part is doing that in a way that actually builds connection, that builds community. Um, because so often when people suppress what they're feeling, they suppress what they're thinking uh, over time, and then it comes out in a way that has frustration with it, and then it hurts our relationships. It brings tension or damages our relationships. Um,
Hmm.
and so the core skill of, I like how you said it, it's like the core leadership skill is to tell the truth up front in a way that actually has us coming closer. In other words, to tell, like, if you're being negatively affected by another person, or if you're not satisfied with the way another person is performing or behaving, can you share that with them without judgment? Because if they receive judgment, especially from someone who has power in an organization or a leader, they're going to contract and feel shame, and that's not helpful for relationship.
Hmm.
So can you communicate it in a way that actually has someone feel encouraged to um, to perform better, or to show up more, right? So much of the challenge in the workplace is worker engagement. A worker who's highly engaged is 300% more productive than a worker who's uh, resentful or has
Hmm.
low morale.
I have another question that, okay, the authentically relating to your juniors is one thing, but
Mhm.
authentic relating to people who have more power and senior, what would you say in that direction?
Mhm. Yeah, well, it takes a lot of courage. And I think we need to have these experiences of bringing our truth out and sharing it and having it go well. Because so many of us have had the opposite experience.
Hmm.
Uh, and that's why we don't tell the truth. Or it's not even necessarily lying or being dishonest, but we're unable to speak our mind. We're unable to speak up because we're afraid of social consequences, or the last time we did it, it didn't go well. And at work, our there's a lot on the line. There's a lot at stake, like our entire, our livelihood, our social reputation.
Hmm.
Uh, so, so we are naturally very cautious about how we show up, in what we speak. So I think there's no getting around practice. In other words, speaking the truth in small ways, and seeing and really getting the training and having the communication tools and skills. That's the basis of the book. It's, there's 30 communication tools and skills um,
Hmm.
in the book, throughout. There's theory as well, but we need the training to be able to have it go well in small ways, and then we can tell the big truth. If we try to go directly to, like, the thing that we've been holding back with our boss for the last 6 months, it might not go well, right?
Hmm. So, what would you? Where should a person start? Let's say if a person has this all past baggages of all kinds, small truths and big truths not revealed. So one I can directly say, if we read this book and it has logic as well as small exercises. I was noticing mirror exercise, and there are a lot of exercises which are very simple ones. And
Mhm.
what would you give? What would be a primer even to the book? So let's say someone who's just watching it, what can the person begin with? Some 2 3 tips, or maybe even if you can explain a short exercise, that also is fine, which a person can right away, get a trailer of what happens when you start authentically relating, even in a work environment.
Yes. Yeah. I will, I'll give an exercise in a moment. I just want to share one teaching. Uh, Curiosity is something that um, it's something that is so powerful, and it's often overlooked because it's so simple, right? At work, and in our lives in general, we're so focused on productivity, efficiency, getting things done, managing the logistics of our lives, right? So it's really important to understand that being in business mode, if you will, where we're trying to get a lot done,
Hmm.
it's a certain um, mood, it's a certain mode, it's a certain frequency that we get into, right?
Yes.
And um, when we're in that mode, we can be less relational. So this is a core concept within authentic relating. So
Hmm.
relational is like I'm actually tuned in to how my communication is affecting other people. I'm tuned into their body language. I'm tuned into the health and what it feels like,
Hmm.
what our relationship feels like. So the core skill is to learn to balance doing and being, or um, productivity and feeling,
Hmm.
and curiosity. A lot of times our conversations with our peers are often, we're catching up about the information. How are
Yes.
your kids? You know, how are your parents, and what's happening in your life. But if you get really curious about the person and how they're feeling and how they think and how they look at the world, and how they're doing in their job, and how they're doing in their lives in general, it actually creates bonds, it creates understanding, because we can learn a lot about life from getting curious about other people. And so just having time for curiosity. And so the exercise would be something very simple. It's like, get personal with your colleagues, because the old paradigm is like, okay, work is work. We don't, that's not my personal life. My personal life is my family and my friends, right?
Hmm.
But actually, the more personal we are at work, the more invested we become in the people around us. And the more invested we become in the people around us, the more invested everyone is to do the mission of the company together. Like a sports team, right?
Hmm.
A sports team, if they're trying to, uh, win a world championship, or win games, it's like they have to be very personal with each other and become friends and become very close, so that they're in each other's lives and really invested in each other's success. And I think in a certain way in the workplace, we've lost that, um, of like really, really being invested in the success of other people. And that begins with just setting aside some time to get personal.
Hmm.
So, and that's just, that could be like, just have a lunch with one person in your company, and just be like, oh, I really want to get to know you. Can we ask each other's questions about each other's lives? Curiosity game, the book, and that you can go to for specifics, and a whole chapter on curiosity.
So because see, I have heard this question a lot of time from people in the corporate world. Is the tendency to be transactional is much higher than relational, and then who has time for these soft and touchy feelings? Plus that if I hear all the story of a person's life, then maybe I would not be able to hold that person accountable, can't be direct and hard with that person, and that may impact the performance. So have you experienced this kind of questions, and what would be your suggestion? Because this question is faced by most of the leaders I have dealt with, and especially people who are growing to be leaders. Maybe your senior leaders have got this sense that, the passion connection is essential. But the people in the middle, what would you tell them?
Well, there's a saying that speaks to this. Like, if you want to go fast, go alone, and if you want to go far, go together.
Yes,
Right? I think it's an African proverb or
yes.
something.
Mm,
And it's like, it's an investment, right? It's an investment of time and emotional energy to really get to know one another and to really check in with people around how they're feeling about their job, right? Um, but we really want to make those investments, and they don't pay off next
immediate.
week.
Mm,
It's like, it takes time. It takes time to really build. And like you're saying, and it's also about enjoyment, right? The more people are becoming friends at work and enjoying working together, uh, the more uh, productive they will be in the long run. Um, yeah.
And I remember in the book you mentioning about that we are organic beings and more similar to plants and animals and not machines. So we don't follow linear transactional style.
Mhm.
And so I can relate to what you are saying.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, this is a theory that I have. Carl Jung, the psychologist that influenced all of Western psychology really deeply. He has these 12 archetypes, but I think even in the modern age, there's the archetype of the machine. And
Mm,
we look at cars and planes and smartphones and computers, and when they're broken, we either get a new one or we get it fixed. And so it becomes so ingrained in our
mm,
psychology that we start to treat
mm,
ourselves the same way. And there's no linear path for a tree growing. It just has its DNA, and it's following its DNA. And
mm,
life is so organic. And so when we try to push ourselves to be machines, the results are not good in the long run. We might get a little bit more work done in the short run, um,
mm,
but it's really helpful to understand that we grow as well. We grow. That's the main part of the teaching is growth from wholeness. We can't, look at one of our personality flaws and then just take a workshop and fix it. It doesn't work like that.
In fact, I remember telling someone that, you can fix a car, it is man made, but a human is not man made. They are, they grow through some other pattern, DNA, and you can't just repair them, remove one part. While medical, science has progressed a lot, but
Yeah.
but it is much, much deeper in that sense.
Mhm.
Hmm. Okay. So what made you take up this whole authentic relating as really a mission, that you wrote
Mhm.
a book, and what made you leave everything and just focus on this and going across the world to reach your message? What is
Mhm.
the core drive for you?
Yeah. Authentic relating is really interesting. It's an open sourced, decentralized movement. So people are doing it all over the world. There's several different companies who are offering workshops along these lines. And when I personally encountered it, it was so transformative for me. It allowed me to really find my gifts and callings and bring them to the world, and create the kind of relationships that I wanted. And, and so what happened for me is I realized that because of population growth and modernization, uh, we're really wrestling with a lot of challenges as a species. You know, uh, you're in India and I'm in America, and we're talking over the computer in real time, and it's almost like you're in front of me. It's amazing how
Yeah.
fast our data transfers are, right? And plane travel has really changed the way the world works in the last 50 years, where it's feasible to go all over the world. Um, and the amount of change and evolutionary pressures that we have with challenges with the environment and you know um, population growth, and so it's just so complex that I I don't want us to lose our humanity, and in fact, like really cultivating communication and cultivating the ability to create teamwork and synergy with another person, I think is the most important skill that we can have as humans. Um, especially, in later in life or like midlife and later, it's like the emotional intelligence skills that we have really create the quality of our lives. And so I just want as many people as possible to be educated in this as early as possible. So I took authentic relating, which is a personal growth method and a personal growth workshop. And, it's a little mini movement. People lead authentic relating games in their living rooms to create friendships and community. And I wanted to translate it for a more mainstream audience and the business audience, because I really believe that as it spreads, and it is spreading quite quickly, it's really helpful for, and it's happening. People who are young people in school are now getting, mindfulness education, and they're learning how to manage their emotions, because this idea of emotional education, is an idea whose time has come. And when I was in school, when you were in school, like we didn't get any
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
training.
Emotional resilience. I'm thinking authentic relating might be as important as addition and subtraction in
Yes.
one day. And so would it be possible for you? So last 10 years you've been diving deeper in this area, and I'm sure in that you might have had turbulent times and conflicts. So would you be able to share any personal professional story where you were able to handle something difficult because of your you know understanding of authentic relating? Do you think that is feasible?
Yeah, well, many of them. I was leading a course with a colleague, and I had gathered, these 25 people together. They were really my community
Okay.
in my town, and she was coming from, a different part of the country, and I had brought her in. And the first day had some challenges. The first day had some. There were some good parts to it, but there was also some challenges, and
Mm,
and like I really needed her to. I really wanted her to be with me in the morning and kind of work these things out. And she's a very fun leader, and she had these like um, she often is very casual, and I was like taking it really seriously because there's a lot on the line for me.
mm, mm,
I remember we ended up using the whole staff meeting to really um, to work on our relationship and work on our teamwork and work on our synergy, instead of talking about the plan for the day. So this, was a 3-day workshop, and this was the beginning of day 2. Um,
mm,
and it was really hard to take that, half hour or so to really work on the challenge and the upset that was happening, but it paid off. Um, by the end of Sunday, like we had a lot of teamwork. And now here we are 5 years later, and she's one of my most valued colleagues, right? She's someone who
mm,
supports me in my work, and I'm helping her in all these different ways. Um, and I think those are the moments where a lot is on the line, and there's upset, there's expectations of something going a certain way, and there's frustration because they're not going that way. Those are the moments that we really need to drop our defenses. Authentic relating has a lot to do with taking off our mask, taking off our armor, right?
mhm,
Um, And it's just natural. We all do it. We all have emotional defenses. We can talk about the ego and psychology, but it's just very natural for us to emotionally or mentally defend ourselves when we feel like we're being blamed for something. And this comes from childhood. If you ask a child, hey, did you do this thing? And they're like, no, I didn't do it. My brother did it, right? It's like we learn very early to try to deflect blame,
Yes.
right? It's just very programmed into us. Well, authentic relating has a lot to do with taking off the masks, taking off the armor, meeting each other as like soft, and the soft animals that we are. Our minds can be very sharp. But if we harden our body and in anger, it's not going to help anyone, right? And if we're soft and embodied, even when we're expressing anger or frustration, or we're open to being impacted and related to by the other. And this all takes training. I'm talking about the core of authentic relating is this emotional availability, even in the face of conflict, even in the face of frustration or disagreement. And a lot of the trainings that we do are working with how to do this in regular life situations, in our friendships, with our spouse, because it affects all aspects of our life, including work.
Yeah. So one question would be, how, if someone wants to be connected with this movement in a practical way with some working group, what is the best way to connect to authentic relating movement?
Yeah, Authentic Revolution is the company. So authrev.org. That's my company. And we have all kinds of resources. We have some free resources. My book is there. You can purchase that. Which the book is really a manual for cultural leaders. I talk about my personal story in the forward of the book. And the conclusion of the book a little bit, but it's very, very practical. I talk about the theory and the philosophy of, one aspect of authentic relating for 3 or 4 pages, and then I go right to a specific exercise or tool of how you can apply it to your life. And that's why there's 30 tools in the book in 12 chapters. Everything is made really, really practical. And there's plenty of exercises that you can lead with your family and friends or at work.
Yes, in fact, I've noted many of them, and I'm going to use them in my sessions. So I have this question. This part is less studied, at least in the corporate world, about the shadow work. And I read about that. I've read about that in many places. And would you like to throw some light on the shadow work, especially why shadow work is important for leaders, and what does it really mean?
Yeah. Well, shadow work is a term from psychology.
Mhm.
And it essentially means that there's a whole part of us that we cannot see, that other people can see. And
Okay.
we call this our shadow. And shadow work is essentially recovering energy, recovering, freedom, behavioral flexibility from our shadow through shining the light on it, through awareness, through acceptance, and this is true at work. I mean, it's especially true with our spouse or or someone we're in a romantic relationship with. After the first phase, which we often call the honeymoon phase of bliss, we start to encounter that other person's shadow because we are intimate with them. We're spending a lot of time with them, or we're starting to live together, and everyone has a shadow, right? And in order to have a successful romantic relationship that lasts for years, right, we have to bring acceptance and love to this person's dark side, right? We get all the benefits of their light side. and we get the challenges of their dark side. And if we just judge them for that and try to change that, the relationship's not going to last very long, or even if it lasts a long time, it's not going to be very happy.
Mm.
And and to a lesser extent, but still very significant dynamics, we have to accept the shadows of the people we work with. You know,
Any example? Can you give an example of a shadow at
mhm,
work or in a romantic relationship?
mhm. Yeah, I have this pattern of when I get it into my head that something is good or something needs to happen, I can move forward very quickly without the permission of other people.
Mm.
I just totally forget to cooperate or synergize. It's just like, oh, I get into my head that like this thing needs to happen, and I'll just go and buy the plane ticket, and then I'll tell my partner, and it's like, no, hold on, like, and so I've had to learn, and I've just, I've made this mistake a dozen times in my life, where I will move forward quickly with something and I won't check with my boss. Right now I'm an entrepreneur and self-employed, but when I used to work for other people, it would really strain the relationship when I would move forward very quickly without permission. um, and because it was in shadow, it's something that would come back like every few months. Like I would try to learn the lesson, but it would come back. I would try to learn the lesson, but it would come back. And so it really is something that over the last 10 years that I've become much more conscious of and much more aware of and much more able to pause and wait. Okay, let me make sure to check in with other people. And these patterns are so strong. They come from our childhood. They come from our family of origin. Um, and, we can't see them without input and feedback from other people. And so one of the core tools of authentic leading is sharing impact, sharing how others are impacting us, both positive and negative. And there needs to be a balance. If it's all negative, it puts too much strain on the relationship. But a lot of times when we're negatively impacted by someone, we just kind of forget about it and push it to the side because
Yes.
um, it's can be challenging to have those conversations. But if we share how we're impacted by others, it gives them feedback. And they need that feedback around their shadows to grow and to become more aware of these things.
So it's a circular thing. That's why you call it circling. In the sense that you give feedback and you receive feedback, and only others' feedback will throw light on your shadow, and then you add your introspection. Very, very useful.
Yeah.
Okay, so my final question is: what advice would you give, as based on whatever you have learned in your life and observed? What advice would you give to a smart and a driven leader?
Well, I would say that leaders are cultural creators. We leaders primarily are making something happen in the world. They're creating a business or a product or a nonprofit, right? And leading other human beings. But at the same time, we need to be conscious of the culture that we're creating. And
Mm.
culture is something that we cannot see. You know, it's not tangible. So a lot of times we can think it's less important. However, it's actually more important. So the culture of are your employees, appreciating one another and building one another up and becoming friends? Is there time and energy built into creating a positive culture? And that's more than having some like fun little things around the office. Really, uh, culture is kind of like the fabric or the net, so that if the business or encounters challenges, or an individual or a worker encounters challenges in their lives, are they caught by the net, right?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, and are they supported? And so the more we're creating uh, fabric and like the web of support, a company is a community. That's, when I do consulting work with companies, that's the place I start. Is like, you have this mission. The mission statement of the business is important, but you're also a community. And what is the cultural health of the community? So find ways, and I would, if I can make it a little more tangible,
Mm.
there are, if you're a leader, there are people in the company who are better at culture than you are, guaranteed. Even though they have less power, they can see things and sense things that you cannot. And to be able to have these people be your eyes and ears, and and really create a communication channel with them so that they can tell you what's really going on, because there's going to be things that happen in the community, in the business, in the culture, that people can't tell you because you're the leader, right? And it's just the nature of power dynamics. There's not really any way to get around it. But you can bring humility to realize, like, oh, what are my weaknesses as a leader, and who can I bring around me to mitigate those weaknesses and balance that?
Wow, thank you very much. I think this whole journey of listening to your answers as well as reading your book is very transforming in its own way. And I think care, compassion, connection, unified tribe, celebrating differences. I made a lot of notes, and dignity and humility, balancing that also I read in the book, and and being discerning. So thank you very much for your time, and
Thank
also for taking up this kind of a mission. Because I feel this mission will cut across all other businesses and strengthen the human fabric, and make people more connected while we are digitally highly connected. But
Mhm.
this is the underlying web which also needs strengthening now.
Yes.
And I think my personal belief has been at a very very deep core level we are all connected. Maybe there's a field which connects us, maybe there's a force which connects us, but that
Yes.
is probably at an unconscious level, and bringing it out
Mhm.
to a conscious level through authentic relating
Mhm.
is very very important and probably need of the hour. So thank
Mhm.
you very much, and may the force be with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rohan. I'm really glad to know you. May the force be with you as well.